During our last two panels, we had examined strategies for providing essential services in communities, especially in rural areas. Across the West, our governors are also working to build their homegrown workforce, both to solve persistent workforce challenges and to ensure that their students can pursue great careers in their communities. This can be particularly challenging in rural areas where students may live hours away from nearest college campuses or have limited exposure to the opportunities that are available. In this panel, Launching Local Careers, we have an all-star group of Montanans who will discuss how they are working collaboratively and creatively to help all Montana students succeed. To lead this important discussion, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Debra Silk. Debra currently serves as Associate Executive Director and General Counsel for the Montana School Boards Association, where she's been since 2000. Debra also advocates for Montana's public schools as an attorney and lobbyist representing the interests of community-owned local public school boards, and is trained in strategic governance, which she uses to lead MTSBA's strategic planning services offered to association members. Thank you all for being here, and pass it on to you.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me okay? I think so. I just have to say, this is the first conference that I've been at with this group, and I feel privileged to be sitting here. Before I introduce our amazing panel, I just want to let you know sort of some of the work that we do at the Montana School Boards Association. One of the things that we're always looking for are innovative opportunities to provide to our students, both in terms of college readiness and primarily, and I would say probably focused in the last 10 years, really on careers for students. And you guys know from the introduction, I'm an attorney by trade, and I don't want to insert too much legalese into this, but in Montana we have a constitutional provision. Many of you probably do have similar things in your constitution, and what it provides is that the goal of the people of our state is to develop the full educational potential of each citizen. So everything that we do in our association and all of our public schools, that is the focus. It's been focused on personalized learning, providing advanced opportunities for students. And I would say over the last decade, probably since 2013, is where we really started paying attention to this, where we went to a proficiency-based model of education. That scares a lot of people because we always think about our K-12 public schools as kids sitting in a classroom and being there for seat time. In Montana, there is no longer a seat time requirement. And the point that I'm trying to get here is that you can have a student in high school, for example. Maybe he or she has an interest in mechanics. They can be working with a local mechanic shop. They can be receiving graduation credit for that class and also getting certification in that line of work. So in terms of what we have in Montana, we also expanded in the 2021 legislative session, we expanded the definition of pupil instruction. And that includes all work-based opportunities for students. So again, we have a lot of flexibility in Montana. I would say innovation is something that everybody involved in public education and workforce development is interested in, and I know it's a priority and a high goal area for our association. And again, I just feel very honored. I don't have the hard work today. These people have the hard work. I just get to moderate and ask them questions, right? So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel. And listen, I want the individuals up here to speak for themselves. So by way of introduction, we have Sarah Swanson. I first met Sarah when she was the Chief of Staff at the Office of Public Instruction. I found out later that Sarah actually grew up in Glasgow and learned yesterday that we have mutual friends from Glasgow. Glasgow, for some of you that don't know, it's up in the northeastern part of the state. I know that Sarah has an amazing background, a successful business owner. She's always been involved and engaged with and has a passion for our rural communities in Montana and providing educational opportunities for students. She is currently working with and for Governor Gianforte's administration as the Director of Strategic Engagement. That really is the bridge between education and our workforce. So Sarah is an amazing person. And again, I think that I'll let you tell your own story. We also have Ron Slinger. Ron is the president of Miles City Community College. I was looking at Ron's bio, and it's amazing that every job that he's ever had, his commitment is to youth, education, communities, and the communities that he is serving, both in terms of building relationships. The other thing that struck me about Ron is he has been dedicated to public service his entire career. I was astonished when I saw that he was a school board member, which is near and dear to my heart, right? But he's also served as a county commissioner, mayor, and he's been on the city council. So when you're talking about somebody devoting their career to community service, Ron is that. We have Adam Gilbertson. He's the senior vice president in field technology innovation at RDO Equipment. I just met him the other day. He also is a governor appointee, and one of the things that I should mention is our policymakers in Montana are focused on what we are focused on here today, on innovation and providing advanced opportunities for our youth in this state to, quite frankly, fill the gap, and a needed gap, in our workforce development. So Adam was appointed to the Montana State Workforce Innovation Board. He currently serves as the chair of Education, Training, and Upskill Committee, and very glad to be sitting up here with him. He's also from Laurel, Montana. And then we have Don Wetzel. He's a member of the Blackfeet tribe. And I was telling Don before we started, I don't know him very well, but he is an amazing person just based upon what he is doing with our youth, particularly with our American people and tribes in Montana, and the leadership opportunities that he's providing with our youth. And I'm going to let him tell his own story. He's also with the Office of Public Instruction as their Director of Tribal Student Achievement Relations and Resiliency Unit. So again, very honored to be up here with these amazing individuals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. And Sarah, take it away.
Thanks, Debra. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Swanson. Like Debra said, I serve as the Director of Strategic Engagement for Governor Gianforte's administration. I'm housed in the Commissioner's office at the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. But state government is still relatively new for me. My background is deeply rooted in the private sector, having spent nearly 20 years as an owner and the general manager of a company called Farm Equipment Sales. We were a large regional John Deere dealer organization with 4 physical locations that covered 14 Montana counties and 2 North Dakota counties in some of the most rural and remote regions of eastern Montana. Our headquarters was in the bustling metropolis of Glasgow, population 3,180, and that was our largest community. It was even named the geographic middle of nowhere by the Washington Post a few years ago, so it gives you an idea of where we're at. Our smallest community, or our smallest location, was in the town of Circle, Montana, population 488. And it was our highest volume, highest margin location, so still very critical to the ag and infrastructure world in eastern Montana. Our sales and service territory for that company included 250 miles of the Canadian border as our boundary to the north, the Fort Belknap Indian community as our boundary to the west, the Northern Cheyenne Nation as our boundary to the south. It encompassed all of the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, and our boundary on the east was the Bakken oil play in the state of North Dakota. Our company needed over 100 highly skilled technicians and innovation experts, and about 80 silver Ford pickups to crisscross that territory every day. And our biggest challenge was finding the qualified staff and the silver pickups to cover that area every day. We had to get really creative in how we were going to cover that in the small communities of eastern Montana. And we experimented with a number of community-based grow-your-own programs. It looked different in every community we operated in because every one of those communities had different resources and different needs. We had to identify and train local youth in each community to bring them up through our organization and hopefully retain a few of them. There was no community college anywhere within the geographic boundaries of that region. We did have exemplary public schools and 3 tribal colleges that we could partner with, but we had no campus for the Montana University system. So we purchased and provided curriculums in robotics and mechanical reasoning as young as kindergarten, things like Project Lead the Way for elementary schools to start those skills. We sponsored dozens of CTSO chapters of a variety career and technical student organizations, everything from TSA to BPA to FFA, any of those organizations that we thought we could develop the workforce skills through, we sponsored those organizations. We took dozens of student trips down to the manufacturing plants for our industry across the Midwest. We worked with our partners at John Deere Company, other dealers across the state, MSU Bozeman, our land-grant college, as well as a number of other stakeholders to develop what we called the John Deere Ag Expo, a once-a-year event where we could bring thousands of Montana students to one place to really start exposing them to opportunities in innovation in our industry and our region of the state. Ultimately, we hired curriculum developers on staff at a John Deere dealership that reported to me that we loaned out to help our local school districts who couldn't afford those economies of scale, who needed help with technical writing or math curriculums to get their students prepared to deliver the skills that industry needed that you couldn't find in a traditional math textbook. And then we paid for over 40 two-year technical degrees for students. And unfortunately for us, by the time we were done running those students through, we only retained about 80% of them, but those that we did retain, we had a higher success rate for the ones that we sent out of Montana to the North Dakota State College of Science. That was our highest success rate for students. But that still wasn't enough. We still weren't meeting the need. We weren't meeting our own need or our community needs. And so we had to create an up and out methodology where we trained more students than we retained, but we trained them to leave our organization, go into other organizations, created an off-ramp for those students to join the high-wage, long-hour careers in the Bakken oil field because the money of that industry was a draw to most of our young people. And then we had to create a seamless on-ramp back in for them to return home, return to their families, and return to our organization when they were done with those hours and wanted to come back. The workforce needs and approaches of our partners in the Fort Belknap Indian community, the Fort Peck Reservation, and Northern Cheyenne were very different from our other communities and very different from one another. And so we were constantly reinvesting in those relationships and evolving new ways to engage. Every time a tribal council member changed or leadership at a tribal college changed, we had to really reinvest in those partnerships. And you'll hear some of these challenges from my colleague Donnie later today, who has so eloquently defined for me in recent years of the need to approach those communities with a workforce development approach of culture first and then the work skills. I wish I'd have known that when I was running farm equipment sales. Ultimately, investing our time and resources into youth proved to be a really successful model. We did become an employer of choice in our region, and we had more young people seeking work-based learning opportunities from our company than we ultimately had positions for those students. Our organization became the largest John Deere dealer group in Montana by volume without sacrificing margin or market share or the profitability markers that we needed to achieve, and we did that in large part because we built a reputation on investing in people and investing in our local schools. After selling farm equipment sales in 2018, I tried to retire. My children would tell you that was a terrible idea for everybody. So in 2019, I went back to work and started developing partnerships for other trade associations in Montana to work directly with their local schools. Our first project was called ProStart. It's a culinary and restaurant management organization originally developed by the National Restaurant Association in partnership with dozens of restaurateurs across Montana, leading students interested in that industry directly into the kitchens and the front of the house at restaurants across Montana. And then I had the opportunity to join the Montana Contractors Association and the Montana Equipment Dealers Association and to help design and implement what we call Build Montana. That was a high school work-based learning program developed during COVID that introduces young people to the high-tech heavy equipment industry by taking them out of their classroom using that freed seat time and really leveraging the industry classroom on-site at an employer where that technology and equipment and innovation lives, the kind of technology that a school district could never afford, but we can utilize it with our industry partners in their workshops. The students graduate programs like Build Montana with career credentials from companies like Volvo, Caterpillar, John Deere. They can go direct to work, or they can join one of our higher ed institutions and continue on their knowledge. My colleague Adam will tell you much more about the development and continued success of that program later today. After building out those industry pathways, I joined state service as the Chief of Staff at the Montana Office of Public Instruction, our Department of Public Ed here in Montana. And I focused on key legislative and rulemaking opportunities, ways that we could modernize and laser focus our education system on personalized and proficiency learning pathways for each student, but utilizing CTE pathways as the rigorous yet equivalent academic pathway that they are. They're not an alternative, they're not less than, they're not an extra step that a student can do. They are equivalent to a traditional academic pathway, and really leveraging that ability for our schools and our students to recognize that opportunity. In critical industries like construction, manufacturing, healthcare, and high tech, building out those partnerships with our schools for students, and really recognizing the academic equivalency that a student can achieve in a work-based learning environment outside of the traditional school. From there, I joined the Gianforte administration, where I sit now, where I work as the Director of Strategic Engagement, bringing this focused partnership not only to our public schools, universities, and tribal colleges, but bringing our industry partners along with us. Whenever we hear Governor Gianforte speak on this work, we always hear him say, industry has to invest. Well, with my background, I know that industry is ready and willing to invest. They just don't know how or where to make that first phone call and where to write the check. That's the basis of this work in our office at the Department of Labor, connecting targeted industry investment throughout secondary and post-secondary institutions to drive actual achievement for our students. We look at it from the perspective that the time for job shadowing is behind us. This isn't about job shadowing or just exploring careers. It's about focused on the robust work-based learning environments available to our students where they can achieve stackable credentials and certificates that they can take with them, either into higher education or into the workforce, but an actual achievement that the student can earn, not just exploration. We've spent the last several years across Montana making the case for change, building consensus and coalitions around the need to change our approach to educating young people based on actual student achievement data and actual student outcomes. We know that every May, we graduate approximately 14,000 students in Montana, and we know that by fall, half of them do not enter a college or a university and do not join the military. We're turning them loose on our economy with no credential, no skill, and no path to a self-sustaining wage. So we've adapted a new mindset in Montana. We really view the education pathway like an interstate with dozens of on-ramps and off-ramps from kindergarten into adulthood, where a student can get on at those traditional intersections or those traditional on-ramps of elementary school, middle school, high school. They can still get on at community college or higher ed, but they can also get off anywhere they want to along the way through work-based learning and career credential pathways, and they can get off for any length of time. For example, you'll hear from my colleague, Mr. Slinger from Miles Community College, how we created off-ramps for a number of rural Montana students in the healthcare industry to get their CNA license and fill critical staff shortages in rural nursing homes while they're still in high school. They're earning that wage, they're filling a need to keep those nursing homes open in their community, and then they have a variety of on-ramps to get back on that interstate. They can go to college to pursue their RN, to pursue a healthcare administration degree, or possibly even medical school, or they could stay where they're at. They could keep working as a CNA for a period of time, they could join a work-based learning or on-the-job apprenticeship to get their LPN at any interval they want. So by adopting this interstate approach, along with personalized and proficiency-based learning for each of our students, we think we're finally able to fulfill that constitutional mandate Deb mentioned, making sure that every single one of our students has an opportunity to achieve their highest educational potential wherever and whenever they choose.
Jump in?
Yes, thank you. That was excellent.
I knew that was going to happen. And I am not as flexible as I was 20 years ago. First of all, it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Ron Slinger. I have the honor of being the 9th president of Miles Community College. I'll give you a little background on Miles. Miles serves a very large area. If I would have been president when Sarah owned that company, we would have been her community college. So we serve all the way up, 16 counties, and actually it ends up being darn near 50,000 square miles is the area we try to serve. So we go all the way up to Canada, down to Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota border, and then about a third of the state over towards Billings. So you want to talk about rural and frontier service, that's what we do. We have some high schools that literally have one senior that we are working with, and most of the time we can recruit them. So I will tell you this. So we put this up, and I'll get to that in 1 second. So I also have the honor of serving on several statewide boards. One of them is the Montana Chamber of Commerce. A couple years ago, they did a survey of over 1,000 businesses. That survey came back and it told you exactly what you think it would say, is that workforce is their biggest problem, but it didn't say that they were lacking technical skills. What it said was soft skills, all of those things, right? We could have told them that, right? So I come back from that meeting and I said to my team at the college, I said, every student that graduates from Miles Community College is going to be job ready. I want these skills that they've identified in this survey, I want to take that feedback and embed it in our courses, embed it somehow, figure it out, I don't care, I just want it embedded, and I want to be able to say that everybody has these skills. Well, they did a great job. They got their heads together, they created a 1-credit course. It's called Career Development and Interpersonal Skills. You'll see this, the course topics here. So clearly, there's some career development aspect to it. It's, you know, trying to figure out what you might want to do, career exploration, resume writing, interview skills. But the things that are really important are the emotional intelligence, time management, effective communication, conflict resolution, teamwork. Basically, they learn how to play well together in a sandbox when they go to the workforce, okay? We launched this class last fall with our own students in all of our career tech ed programs. The feedback we received from our own students was phenomenal. They literally said to us, no one's ever told us this before. I feel really ready to go to work. I think I understand what an expectation is of an employer is now, okay? So about October, I was reading these feedback from our students, and I just looked at our team and I said, listen, this is crazy that this is the first time they've seen this or heard this stuff. We need to get this into high schools. So we try to develop, how do we do that, right? So we created a program called the Opportunity to Realize program, where we identified the 40 school districts in eastern Montana that we are targeting to partner with. We want to embed this class in their school districts. And when I say embed, I mean we want them to guarantee that as a junior at least, they take this course. They make it part of their pathway. We provide it for free, and it's distance learning. And they can do this at no cost to them, no cost to the students or to the families. We piloted it this spring with 2 of our local high schools. They enrolled all of their seniors with us. Same exact result. Those students came back with the same things like, wow, I feel so much more confidence, and wow, I actually think I know what I might want to do, okay? All the things you're going to hear about they're working up here are great programs, need to be supported, but we need to get them focused. We need to have them understand whether they're going directly into workforce or upon graduation, or whether they're going on to college. We still need them to focus and actually have a plan, okay, and be job ready. So I am happy to let you know that as of today, we now have 14 of those school districts signed up that we're launching with this fall. I have another 3 that we're working with that I think will be signed up within the next week or 2. So with all of this, as Sarah mentioned, in Montana, 50% of high school kids don't go to college. In rural Montana, it's more like 75% don't go, okay? By implementing this program, we will be able to say in 2 years, when I get all 40 of them, and I will get all 40 of them, we will be able to say 100% of eastern Montana kids go to college. I'm not saying to get a degree or certificate, but they all will have a 1-credit, transferable credit that can go anywhere in the university system, because we have Common Core numbered system, and 100% of high school graduates will be job ready upon graduation because they have learned these skills in this class, okay? I also want to let you know, to give you an example. So one of these, he's like my poster child. He's one of these kids that was in this first pilot. So he's from a large ranching family. He doesn't need to go to college. He knows what he's going to do. He's going to run that ranch someday, okay? So he hates school. He is mad as a hornet that his school district made him take this class. So in this class, there's modules, and after every module, you have to do a discussion board post where you write a paragraph talking about what you learned and what your thoughts are. His first 3 posts were basically this: I can't believe the school district's making me take this class. This sucks. School's for fools. That's basically what he said, okay? 4th week, epiphany moment. He writes, I was talking to my dad last night. We think I should probably take the CDL program at Miles Community College next year because I can then drive our cattle to market across state lines. As a junior, I would have said to him, and I don't know what his name is, it's probably a good thing, especially that Schools for Fools comment. I would have said, listen, Johnny, you're right. You don't need to go to college, okay? But you know what? Next year you got 2 free classes you can take. You should probably take our ag business class in the fall because you know what? You need to know how to amortize a loan on equipment. You need to know how to run a budget on a farm. That will help you. It'll help your farm. It'll help the whole community. I think he would have taken it because I wasn't talking to him at that point about a year or 2 years or anything like that. I was talking about a specific thing that's laser focused on what he knows he's going to do. That's the power of this program, okay? And I'm evangelical about this. I will preach this. I believe we've stumbled upon a program that actually every rural community college in the nation should be doing because it's a complete game changer for the communities and for those students. I would like to see the entire state of Montana adopt that. So there's other people, though, when you talk about investment, I'm happy to let you know, within the last 2 months, we had a private investor donate $100,000 to this program because they believe in what we're trying to do, okay? And by the way, that was unsolicited. They asked me what we're working on. I told them. Next thing I know, they told me they wanted to invest. So I just believe that we are modeling something that all of you could copy in your states and would change the entire dynamic of the workforce need for today and for the future. And I'll stop there. Thank you. And I'll try not to drop this on the floor.
Yeah, that's right. Hello, everyone. Adam Gilbertson. And just going to maybe take a couple of minutes and talk about my background. I'm a Minnesota kid by the native side of the world. I've moved to Montana now twice, and I'm pretty confident it's going to stick this time. And at least my wife has informed me I'll be going alone if I decide to leave. But for the last 20 years, I've worked for RDO Equipment Company, which is one of the largest John Deere distributors in the world. We have locations all across the western states, starting in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Oregon, Washington, California, and Texas. And we've been very involved in partnering with workforce development, young people into trades careers. Since I started in 2003, we've had a program that helped young people pay for diesel technology programs. Today, that is a tuition incentive of $31,000 at our organization, which basically pays the entire cost of the school along with the signing bonus and puts them into about $8,000 in tools that they need to do the work in our industry. But the reality is, we also know that there's a workforce crisis in kind of the legacy industries of construction and agriculture, and the real kind of underlying reality is that there's a complete disconnect between industry and education. And if you think about what's happening in industry, major corporations like John Deere, Caterpillar, Volvo have created their own university systems. John Deere's university system currently sits at about 26,000 classes that they deliver globally across the world to bring education to the workforce that needs to do the work every day in a really rapidly changing way. There are tractors in the field right now that are running autonomously. There are sprayers that are using AI and machine learning technology to reduce the use of pesticides and herbicides and improve the quality of the field, along with reducing the input costs to feed the world. And that technology is rapidly disrupting our industry, which means we've got to figure out how to train quicker, faster, more effectively, And we've got to reestablish this connection to our education system because in most of these careers, which I'd like to brand Plan A careers, because they really are. They're not, well, if you can't go to college and you can't do these things, then I suppose this opportunity in agriculture or construction is a place for you. It's not the reality anymore. The number of $100,000 jobs in these two industries is substantial. 2 years ago, our friends in the Contractors Association worked on a survey. This was pre-COVID, but the question was, if you could make $100,000 in the construction industry, would you do it? And 36% of the kids said yes. You think about that. Great career, great opportunity, stay home generally, have the opportunity to make a very secure financial living, and we get less than half of the kids. Fairly, if you're looking at the glass half empty, it's fairly frustrating. Our executive director of the contractors in Montana said, show me the 36%. We'd love to start there. And so in the middle of a pandemic, the Contractors Association and the Equipment Dealers Association literally in April of 2020 approved a joint partnership to build a workforce development program called Build Montana in the state to help drive young people into the careers that are here and available in Montana. And we did it in a way that said, if we can partner with the school and come in and be there in the classroom, as well as putting real on-the-job experiences together for the young people to see what a career in our industry looks like, we'll have a better opportunity to put that into play. Sarah and her group, as we were starting this process, the stories of how they use John Deere University in a one-by-one individualized or customized application in northwestern Montana to bring a student into a trades career was kind of the foundation we used, along with, and I'll give a little credit to senator, representative, depending on which time of his political career, but Senator Lou Jones has been really key in this effort of creating the proficiency-based language in law here in Montana that allows a school district to declare proficiency and put a kid in the field and be flexible instead of being stuck in the classroom every day learning. And so we've had the opportunity to use that to kind of grow from that into a program that allows two trade organizations that have 300-400 businesses here in the state of Montana to put a program together to get into the school and partner with the district. And so in March of 2020, we approved this and we put our first class in place in Billings, Montana, that consisted of 6 young people. Think about when that was. The first year back to school after the pandemic, Montana was just opening up. Most other states were still in a virtual environment. We had the opportunity to be in the classroom with these young people. And we started with safety. So they come out of the course now, and they're certified in the first week in OSHA 10. So there's a credential that young person can take into the workforce that's important to their growth and the ability to prove that they're employable. The second opportunity, we integrated John Deere University into this process and basically used the level 1 technician curriculum that helps understand hydraulics, electronics, powertrains, undercarriage. We put a degree in 3D machine control, or a course load in 3D machine control, which is becoming very, very important in how the work gets done in construction today. And then another sector, or a section on unmanned aerial vehicles in construction. So capture them a little bit with technology, some really cool things going on in that space in construction. But they go through this online component of this first, and then come to the dealerships for the hands-on of, okay, how do I apply what I learned online on the machine theory and how the machine operates. And then we teach them how it works, how you maintain it daily. And then from there, with the partnership with the contractors, we go to the field, and now the machines are working in the field, and we have the opportunity to show them how a paving operation works, how an aggregate or quarry operation makes very large rocks into very small rocks every day, which is really important for the infrastructure we're building. They go to site development. They get a chance to see bridge work. They learn what a concrete emplacement looks like on a project. And all along the way, they're engaging with different leaders, different operators, different people in a number of different companies to see those opportunities firsthand and what a career in these industries can look like. Our first year, we had two young men, O'Shea and William Afraid-A-Bear, who kind of stood out in the class. Most importantly, they were incredibly quiet when they started. They had both been at Walmart and were working together there. They'd come from an Indian reservation just south of Billings and had been not really sure where their careers were going to go. Through the course of this 8-week program, they had the opportunity to show up every day, take part. They were very, very attentive, very involved in that process. And one of the general managers from Knife River, who was actually leading the teaching, and I think I'll probably emphasize that, how important it is for industry to partner in this process, had the chance to experience how they showed up every day. At the end of the class, they graduated and weren't 100% sure where they were headed. And Hal asked his team, you know, we've got these two operator positions for two 40-ton haul trucks that we can't fill. We need that to happen this summer. Tell me why William and O'Shea can't fill those roles. 18 years old, first time through a program like this, but they had the opportunity to experience what that looked like day in and day out. They made the offer. Both of them started at $25 an hour at 18 years old and spent the entire summer working in that process. William shared with us as he came on board that this job made him the highest wage earner in his family. Completely life-changing for him. At the end of the summer, William stayed on full-time, worked through the winter and into the next construction season. O'Shea made the decision to go to the University of Montana in Missoula, an opportunity that I'm not confident, had he not had the opportunity to go through a program like this, he'd had the confidence to jump into. The end of year 2, William decided to follow his friend to the university and is going through now another path, which is great for him, and we're hoping someday he'll come back to the industry. But over the course of the last 3 years, we've now graduated 3 classes. In fact, on Friday, the 3rd class of 13 will graduate from Billings. The end of the day, last Friday, the last kind of project they went through, there was over $2 million in construction equipment and technology on site for their Dig It Day as they laid out a project and dug it as the kind of the culminating portion of that project. Had the opportunity to see the latest and greatest technology, put it to work, and now there are 6 companies in Billings that are partnered together in this process. So I mentioned at first that John Deere University was kind of the first in, but now Volvo and Caterpillar have crosswalked their curriculum into this program, and now both of those businesses in Billings are also partnering in this process, taking young people into their pathway in the school, and then we bring them all together in these construction experiences. So it's a different way of looking at the world. It's certainly a lot of work, so I'm not gonna kid you, this isn't easy, but we've got to reconnect these pathways, and this has been a really good way for us to do that. The contractors are committed to this at a level that I've never seen. In January at their annual convention, they raised $104,000 selling dessert to fund this program. And continuing to show that commitment from the industry and what it means as we go forward to connect Montana kids to careers here in the state.
Good afternoon. My name's Donnie Wetzel Jr. I'm from the Blackfeet tribe. I'm also German and Irish. And my mother's a 7th generation Montanan out of Missoula, farm and ranching family. My father's 1,000th generation from the Blackfeet Nation up by Glacier Park. And I'm really honored to be here and to ask to come and share some of the work that we're doing. I'll introduce you in my Blackfeet as well. I'm working on these things, and these are things that our kids are really interested in. So, Oki Natanaku Sikamiotas, Amskapi Pakani. It's good to see you guys. So I just said hello, good day to you. My Blackfeet name is Black Horse. So that was given to me by George Kicking Woman, who is one of our elders from the Blackfeet tribe. So today I wanted to share some of the initiatives, and I'm very grateful that the Superintendent Arntzen let me come down and sit here and share some of our work out of our tribal relations. It just changed because we absorbed another unit, so it's now Tribal Student Achievement Relations and Resiliency. So I have, within our unit, I have a Tribal Youth Coordinator that focuses on our tribal youth. I have two Indian Student Achievement Specialists that are really focusing on some of the wellness, and I really appreciate the telehealth work that was previous. We got, you know, the brain can't learn when it's stuck in trauma, and sometimes we have a lot of that happening. So my past was in suicide prevention. So I've always looked at education to get ahead of that and to build strong young men and women going forward instead of repairing them when they're a little bit older and a little bit more damaged. So we also have a language and culture specialist. That's a big piece of what I'll share as well. And we're just trying our best to get as much of the voices at the table from Indian country. So I wanted to share, I got to work with Sarah back when she was at OPI, and some of the things that we talked about in the earlier levels, and I grew up in Browning, Montana. My grandfather was the chairman of the Blackfeet Nation, and my father was a coach and teacher and administrator up there as well. And they taught me this great strength and belief in who and what I was. And as you see, I'm light-skinned, but I never had any issue of understanding my identity. So I graduated up around Fort Belknap in Harlem. And so I'm a Highliner too. You know, Highliners got to stick together because that wind will blow us away individually. No, just kidding. But I think some of the work that I did, I started out at the Montana-Wyoming Tribal Leaders Council, which I guess is kind of the UN of the Montana-Wyoming tribes. They go out and work at the federal level with some of our IHS, BIA, some of those funding things. So while I was there, you know, our tribal nations are a nation within a nation, and speaking and working for our tribal leaders, oftentimes people don't understand that when you meet a tribal leader, it's basically like meeting the president of Germany, you know, because they have their own language and culture and dances and ways of life that are often, people don't realize that. And so working with many of our tribal leaders, I wanted to look at ways of building those skills within our youth to become stronger leaders when they go represent us at a high level in DC or at the federal levels. So grabbing the mic and speaking from the heart, knowing a focus of where you want to go, and various things kind of became a passion of mine. And so when I was asked to come and work at OPI, that was kind of the direction that we were going. So when it comes to economic development in Indian country, it's an interesting story if you think about it. You know, our tribes this was only 100, 150 years ago if you really think about this. Our tribes were out on the plains, and they were living with the seasons, and they were put on reservations and told to farm and ranch and use and work the land when before they worked with it. They didn't work on it. And so some of those initiatives in those early years to become farmers and ranchers didn't click with our people. And so that land base was the main thing that they had. And if you look across the times and the generations, our tribal people weren't allowed to practice their culture and ways until 1978. You know, I was 5 at that time, and you don't realize some of this stuff. So what I want to share with you guys today is kind of like the direction that we want to take within our communities, and more relevant. I think everybody's talking about relevance. And rural communities across the state are very similar to everything we're dealing with. So what we see is there's some different approaches. And when Sarah and I were talking once, we were talking about perceptions of wealth. And one time a guy contacted me, he was a professor at Yale, and he was going to do an intergenerational poverty study on Native Americans and wealth within Native Americans. And I said, well, hold on now. Your vision of wealth may be different than ours. What some may see as my bank account, my house, my money, my car, that may be modern day society, perception of wealth. Within us, it's our culture, our language, our families, the land that we hold that we're actually connected to since time immemorial, It's our indigenous lands, these different things. And I think him and I went back and forth, argued a bit, and then I think we shook hands and figured some things out. But I think when we're looking about economic development in Indian country, that's something that we don't look at enough, is this revitalization of our language and culture. Like I said, 1978. And you got some things happening now. My dad, if you ever met my father, he was quite the character. We were talking about things. My grandfather was dealing with Job Corps back in the days and the Blackfeet Reservation, always trying to look for employment. My dad one time told me that people come to Montana for the mountains, rivers, and Indians. And so figure out a way, and I'd always laugh at him, but then I seen Yellowstone, and kind of follow that route, But if you think of that concept of Yellowstone, so I'll go to our youth. During COVID, I was very worried. I think everybody was, because I think COVID showed our education system is a lot more than instruction. It's a relationships, it's a social interactions, it's safety, it's food. It's all these things that we all were worrying about when the students weren't able to have that. So we put together a virtual youth leadership group. And Sarah brought it up quite often yesterday. We did all this for free. It was just hard work, and we didn't have a budget. We didn't have nothing, but we set a time and opened it up to any students that wanted to tap in. And so we created a virtual youth leadership group called RISE. And students from across the state and Indian country and in our urban settings would attend this virtual conference once a week. And so through that, they came up with various topics, and the themes that they had were leadership was one, indigenous worldview was another, and then we had gaming and apps, and then music development. So where they were going from is, I don't know if you guys have direct access to youth in your positions, but if you don't, I think you should set up an advisory group, because they really live in today's world, and sometimes I like to listen to where they're going with things. It's like rock and roll, when they said rock and roll is going to ruin everything. Well, they say that about video games. They say that about all these things these students are doing, and now you have students getting scholarships to play EA Sports in college and getting $1 million contracts. So, it's just really interesting. So when we started to do this, it was almost a discussion around the evolution of education, because they can become influencers. We may not like it, but it's happening, and they make a lot of money off of this stuff. And so they'll really share some things. But the main focus was our tribal nation speaking our own narrative. And that's where like a media show like Yellowstone comes in. If you guys have ever seen Reservation Dogs, it shows a world of our tribal reservations and our communities that often isn't seen. It reminds me of early African-American shows like, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or The Cosby Show, when you had an image into that world. And so we have a lot of that happening, and when we're looking at economic development, we have more folks interested in hiring Native actors and writing stories and histories, and our students want to start to speak their voice. And so it's a really exciting time. We also look at music. There's such a thing as indigenous hip-hop, where our kids are speaking their stories. And it's rooted, and it's different than kind of an inner city. It's more rooted in the language and the culture. So this is where a lot of our students are going. And so it's really interesting. When we talked about indigenous worldview, what we did is we opened access to our knowledge keepers, or some would call elders. you know, we lost a lot of them during COVID. And so as they would pop into a Zoom meeting, what I have been taught in my own journey, and I'll just make the note that I don't represent all the tribes. Every tribe is very unique in their own way. So I'm speaking from my experience. But I had one elder that many folks were asking for his assistance in his knowledge during that time of COVID. So he decided to do a Zoom, and they put it out there. And he was just going to share a few things of the knowledge and, you know, previous pandemics that the tribes went through in the past, how they got through it, how they hunkered in, how they kept this knowledge with them. And he had 600 some people on that Zoom. And he was just so humbled. And this guy is like Yoda. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he was so humbled to have that many. So again, that's another thing that we're really looking at, is how do we tap into some of these cultural ways? And I wrote down this question. How do we tap into the cultural wealth of tribal communities and leverage that as a source of jobs and economic opportunity rather than focusing on the wealth in the traditional jobs market? So we've tried that approach. We've tried, you know, get a job, create your own entrepreneurship, build a new store in Browning, Montana. It just doesn't click a lot of times, you know? And when you talk to the youth, it isn't the typical, I'm going to get my degree, I'm going to go and I'm going to, you know, make $1 million. It's more about, I'm going to do something for my mom, for my dad, for my family. The tribes are still very close. And I think the direction that we want to start to look at is creating relevant opportunities where they're at and really listening to youth and having the guidance of our knowledge keepers. Because within them is the value systems of who and what we are, the realization that, you know, when I'm on my deathbed, what do I want around me? The degrees I earned and the cars I own, or do I want my family? Do I want my loved ones? So those are the concepts that we're trying to look a little bit more. And can we develop an education system that kind of leans in that manner? You know, I don't know. But if we keep moving in a direction of curiosity around, you know, television, and there's many outsiders that are very curious about Indian country. And there's a lot of trust that needs to be developed, but through tourism, through television, through whatever it may be, there is a ton of opportunity around economic development, and our people can be who they are. They're not trying to fit into the box that they were told to. So as we move forward in a lot of this, we put together an AmeriCorps grant, and we're going to create a Tribal Cultural Connections Corps. And it's very difficult sometimes because there isn't a lot of opportunity out there in our small rural communities, just like everybody in Montana. But I think what we do have is we have those elders. We have this revitalization of language. So the AmeriCorps grant is going to look at that gap when our students graduate for about 2 years where they don't know where they're going to go. And I sit with our students. There's a lot of loss. There's a lot of rough things that happen in those 2 years. So can we offer opportunities of building a bridge between the mentors of the elders into the school district? Can we start to hire some of our own students to help mentor some of the younger folks and create jobs in that manner, in that sense? We have students that are going to drop out, and because we had a music studio and they were into this, 3 of them are now staying in school, and they're using some of the lyrics they're writing in their educational courses and classes. So we're looking to fill that gap that it gets very nervous about when you work with students there. And so that's a big piece. But I just love that idea, Tribal Cultural Connections Corps. You know, it's going to be big. I think that giving that opportunity there. Our students also want to fix up their communities. They want to outfit. They want to have their own land, and they want to work in that manner. But they want to stay home. Sometimes when we follow the typical path, our students go off to college. Some of them don't come back. And when they do come back, there's a disruption there. because it's just how it is. There's a lot of lateral oppression amongst our people, which it never was like that before. But we're starting to knock down a lot of those walls, and really it comes from listening to our tribal people. So if anybody here works in Indian country, go to them, don't tell them what to do, ask them what you can do to help. And they will guide you, and I think that's a whole untapped resources that can really shape the future of our nation, you know. I mean, I was always taught when you're seeking knowledge and growth in your own journey of life, and you need guidance, you go to the elders that have been there, done that. Within our country, we have indigenous elders of the continent that have never been tapped into. And why don't we go to them a little bit more? They're not loud, they're not outspoken, but they're there, and they know a lot. And so as we keep going, you know, as Yellowstone gets a season 4 of whatever decade it's in, you're seeing a little bit more of that stuff, and it's exciting. And I think we have elders now more willing to share some of this stuff. And the youth are really also bringing that out. So those are a few of the things that we're working on, and thank you.
I think I told you that this panel was amazing, right? I'm just sitting here in awe about what the 4 of you have done. I have a list of questions, but I want to make sure that we have time. If there's anybody in the audience, if you have questions of any of us, you most certainly can step up. Yeah, I think they have a microphone.
Yeah, come this way. Right behind you. Oh, sorry about that.
Hi, I have a question for Don. So just an observation that I've had. So, and this is in relationship to telehealth. So I live in Wyoming, and in Lander, there are a couple of tribes in Lander, and they applied for a grant to get equipment, and they have about $500,000 worth of telemedicine carts that are sitting in a closet with a blanket on them. And I tried to go out to help them, you know, start the cart, explain how this works. We had IT, I guess, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's frustrating, but it's also heartbreaking that they just couldn't get it off the ground. And if there ever was a model or, you know, a place where telemedicine could be really great, and I really gave it my all for a couple of years, and I just couldn't get through whatever it was. It was just one thing after another, and I don't know, just an observation.
Yeah, there's a lot to that question.
Yeah.
Did they ask for that? Were they part of that discussion to bring that in? Did they have a group, or were they?
Yeah, I mean, they had to go through a pretty heavy application for the grant to get this equipment, and it was a lot of, you know, yeah, we're gonna look at end-stage renal patients and people who needed dialysis, and we were partnering with Banner, and we had like a team approach, but there was turnover of, you know, they couldn't hold on to the nursing staff, they couldn't hold on to IT, broadband, fiber. And then, of course, you know what hit the fan, and everything ultimately tanked. I just couldn't figure it out, honestly. Yeah.
No, that is a deep question. Some of the things I know with our youth, and I'm pretty sure some of you have telehealth in some of our communities. I know that the face-to-face interactions is always a little bit better with some of that, and usually when those things happen, it's the same thing when the COVID funds came and everybody bought a ton of computers and this and that and this and that. Many of them are still sitting in closets at places, and it's just, I often, with the work that we've done, we've been spending probably 10 years building the trust and building an understanding. And that's, I am of Indian country, you know, and so I think if you can, you know, spend time and have it come from directly from them, like they're a part of it. That's where I'll lean on youth. If the youth believe in something, they will go, but you need about 5 or 6 of them, and they can really carry it on. It is just a certain disconnect, because there's philosophies around some of that too that maybe we can visit on another time. But yeah, I know those frustrations, and I think when you have them in the beginning of that process, making sure that they have things lined up. A lot of times I approach the knowledge keepers, and there's a way you can do that, but we can visit on that too another time.
Great panel. I really enjoy the comments regarding bringing industry to the table. I think it's important that they participate. If they're looking for that workforce, they have to engage early. What you talked about with Miles Community College and what you're doing, I would advocate to expand into the need for wildland firefighters across this country. A lot of the fires and such up in Alberta are getting folks from Oregon and other parts. A lot of times when Oregon's on fire, we get them from New Jersey. So expanding that into some of the rural areas and education will take them across this country and into other countries. My main question, though, is for Dawn. You mentioned gaming and apps, and I was really happy to hear you say that. My son wanted a game years ago, Grand Theft Auto, and all I could think of is like, no, this ain't not gonna happen. But we got him a flight simulator, and now he's a medevac pilot. It matters what you put in front of your children, and so are you exploring the areas as far as with pilots and any of those types of games? And where I go with that is that there is a huge shortage of pilots in this country, and you could be starting that workforce potentially at where you're at. Tribes and reservations and remote areas need runways, and we need those pilots and people that cover that area for emergency response. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a gamer myself, so I'm always into that. I think that's a great idea. The thing about many of the communities that I work with at a tribal level is it's wide open. Possibilities are insane. What some of our students were leaning towards was developing video games with our language and our stories and histories involved, where you are the character. And the Inuit tribe created something like that. So again, like, how do we get some of our native youth involved in their culture and language? It's very difficult, because they say, well, why do I need that now? But there's this hunger now. So like, those are some of the things that have come up with kids. But we did do this virtual youth conference, and they built in Minecraft, because it's cross-console, they built a conference stadium. And only 4 signed in, but it was really cool. There were blockheads walking in there and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think sky's the limit with a lot of that stuff. And in the apps, you got language apps, you got all kinds of stuff, and so there's huge interest. And I know that there's a lot of legislation that's pushing some of that as well. So that's all good, but we should visit on that. Yeah.
I might just add to that comment.
Sure.
We're in the process of finalizing a workforce innovation grant in Montana right now to put disabled veterans in the operation chair of an piece of heavy equipment, but not in the machine, in a gaming council off-site. And the reality of that technology extending into a number of different industries is here today.
So does that mean it's my turn?
Sure.
Hi, good afternoon. I really appreciate the conversation centered around youth and approaching workforce shortages. We mentioned pilots. I work in construction. You can say the same for public sector folks, and every one of our states and local governments trying to attract engineers, and you can say the same for teachers. You can say the same for nurses. Every kind of traditional job is short folks, and as our dependency factor changes, as we're having children in different ages and folks are living longer. Can you talk a little bit about maybe attracting an older workforce and some of the work that you've done in that regard, or even maybe across gender roles of women in construction? I mean, we have less than 10% of our construction workforce is women, but 50% of the population. So maybe some of the traditionally that gender specific for that type of role, and how maybe that has helped fill in some of the workforce shortages as well.
Sarah, you want to take the lead?
Yeah, I can take the first step at that. So that is the beauty of our vision of the interstate, right? The on-ramps, the off-ramps. They're not time-bound, they're not age-bound. We absolutely vision the rapid retraining investments that we've made, whether they were through one-time only COVID dollars, whether they were through, governor's education relief dollars, really focusing on the whole gamut of the age range and where can we find the appropriate training to fill the needs. From our perspective at the administration and the department, we make data-driven decisions all the time, much like all of you do, driven by our labor market information. We just updated the Montana Post-Secondary Opportunity Report, which is basically our report card on how our universities are filling those labor market gaps, and then identifying where are the holes and bringing industry to the table to invest in those holes to get folks in. As far as women in the workforce, that is rapidly evolving, especially in fields like agriculture and construction. 2018 doesn't seem like that long ago. When I sold my company, I was almost always the only woman in the room when we brought together a group of John Deere dealers. I can remember my first panel much like this, where the moderator announced to the room that we'll get started when that dealer from Montana shows up. And I was like, no, she's here. She's just wearing a dress. But the difference is, just this year I went with Adam. We received an award for our work on Build Montana from the National Contractors Association in Chicago this year. And they had an entire room with a reception for women in construction. And there were over 200 women in the room, just kind of networking and making that change. That's evolved in just 5 years. So absolutely we're focused on it, but we're not only focused on it. We make our labor-driven decisions based on where the gaps are, and then we really focus on community by community. How we solve this in Billings with a project like Build Montana, Billings being the largest urban center in Montana, is very different than how we'll approach it in Bozeman, Glasgow, or the Blackfeet Nation. We're really focused on finding those community drivers and letting us lead them to their need, and then bringing the state to wrap around them in those services, rather than going in and saying, we think you need X program. We're trying to build those coalitions locally and then bringing together the right partners. If it happens to be in the third of Montana where Mr. Slinger is, of course we bring Ron to the table. But if it happens up in northwest Montana, we probably bring the Blackfeet Tribal College, as well as Flathead Valley and maybe even our partners from MSU.
If you don't mind, I'd like to jump in on that one. So also, we're at historic lows, right, in unemployment rates and things. So companies, if you can fog a mirror with your breath, they'll hire you, right? God forbid you can pass a drug test, because then you're on the CEO track at that point. But so what we did is we realized employers are talking about even their incumbent workforce needing these same skills and also needing upskilling, right? So what we developed was a program called Workforce Solutions Program, where we work directly with companies to help them create their own micro-credential, okay? All we're doing is repackaging our existing courses in a way that's meaningful for them. So the largest independent bank in the state of Montana, Stockman Bank, is one of our partners in this. They have a Stockman certificate. It's just 4 classes. They selected them. Okay, and when we were meeting with them to help them design what that would look like, they told us you'd be shocked at what they wanted. They wanted business writing, because they said, we have people that are coming in and writing emails underneath our logo that are embarrassing, right? They wanted interpersonal communication, which goes back to all those soft skills, playing well together. Those are mandatory classes within their own certificate. Okay, and then what they do is they sit down with the employee. The supervisor says, hey, Sarah, I think you're going to be a loan officer with us. We see that as a potential for you. So then they look at their list and say, great, you have to take accounting, and you also have to take a marketing class, because you're going to be involved in both those things with that thing. If we think they're going to go in IT, then they take an IT class or 2. I never award that at one of our Miles Community College graduations. That is tracked within their HR office. Their HR office awards it because it's an internal thing. We are simply the educational partner. I think we got to get out of the mindset. Now, I am not saying you don't need a bachelor's and all that. I actually joke about this all the time. In higher ed, we give away a bunch of letters, right? AS, BS, PhD, MA, and so forth. What we really want to give away is a JOB. That is what we need to be focused on. And these people already have them, but they need upskilled. So let's upskill them. And so that does not necessarily mean they need an associate's degree or certificate. They're already there working. Let's get them the skills they need. And so we also have a healthcare partner that's in that. Sydney Health Center is a part of that. And actually, I thought theirs was brilliant. They actually, their first one was medical terminology course. They wanted everyone that goes into the program to take, because they said when a person walks in the hospital, they don't care who you are. You could be working in their gift shop, you could work after, and they need to get directed in the right direction. The employee needs to know at least some medical terms to get them directed in the right way. I thought that was brilliant. I never would have thought of that. So,
I think we had one more question in the back. We have about 5 minutes left. So, sir, if you want to ask your question, and we'll see who can answer it.
Yeah, just a couple comments and then a question. The young man you mentioned in a ranching background, I'm pretty similar background myself. Somebody said that the meaning that'll sustain you through life is the adoption of responsibility. And that happened in my life when my stepfather got a brain tumor and passed away, and I stepped up and took on a large ranching estate, farm and ranch operation. And I never went to college, not formally educated per se, self-taught for the most part, studied a lot. So I appreciate the focus, and that's part of what I never had growing up in school and education, was something that was focused around my interests. And for me, and to you, Don, as well, part of our problem is we're predispositioned to selfishness. And it takes, and like you said with tribal ethics, I think that applies to the human nature across the board, no matter what culture you have. It's not about material profit, it's about serving others first. D.L. Moody used to say, if you take a man or a young man that's stealing nuts and bolts from a railroad track and give him a college education, he'll steal the whole railroad track. So there's an ethical need that undergirds education that's lacking across the board in many respects. We need a motivating factor and conviction in our lives to do what's right, wherever we are and whatever we do. I now serve, I'm a director on the Grass Commission in the state, serving a local conservation district, and starting my own business as a consultant for public land policy to protect our natural resource industries, which are under attack. So I'm looking into developing apprenticeship opportunities to disciple young people to do that kind of work. So maybe have a follow-up conversation with you, Ron, on that. But I guess any advice on, because each of us share the load of taking on people in our lives and helping to train them up and give them purpose and a passion for whatever they want to do or whatever their convictions are. So I think the onus falls on all of us. So I guess any words for how we each individually can better accomplish that responsibility wherever we are. So.
Anybody want to take that?
Well, it's a very simple yes/no answer. First of all, thank you for what you're doing, right? And I think I actually believe everyone up here is modeling this. I mean, the stories you've heard, as far as, I mean, you have to listen, you have to incorporate, you have to, I mean, you're redesigning the way people can explore these different careers. You're listening and encouraging the idea of, let's listen to the elders, let's listen to what the kids say, right? And you're evangelical about us all over the state, trying to pull people into these explorations. I think you have to, you know, I have one pet peeve in my life, and that is I hate people will think they're the smartest person in the room, okay? Because I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and I'm never going to ever try and BS you, okay? And there's a ton of stuff I don't know, all right? I should sign up for your stuff. I can't even change the oil in my car. So with that, I think going into it with a genuinely open heart and going into it hearing what they have interest in, and then offering them pathways, these on-ramps, these off-ramps, and letting them know it's okay if you don't know that you want to be a teacher or a doctor. There are so many careers out there right now. There's going to be 10 times more of them that aren't even created yet. It's okay. It's more about how do we instill the things that we know are going to really be those. You talked about ethics. I totally agree with you on that. I also agree on critical thinking, how to play well in a sandbox together, emotional intelligence, how to have all these things so you can pivot and be open to opportunities once they come to you. So I'd be happy to have anyone else jump in on that because I'm out.
Thank you so
Okay.
I'll go ahead and say something on that.
Sure, you can have the last
I really
word.
appreciate what you're saying there, because I think what I have learned is our entire life we have our own journeys, and it's to become the best person of integrity that we can be. And I will be doing that in my Blackfeet way. I'll be doing that till the day I pass to the other side. So if we had more folks working in that manner, and understanding that your journey is going to have some lefts and rights and going in those ways, but really tapping into the passion of the youth or whoever you're working with, you can't beat passion. If they have passion for something, it's just, okay, let's figure this out. But being a person of integrity, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned about moving ahead in my journey. And so I really appreciate what you said there.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank the four of you, too, for sharing all of the great things that you're doing in Montana. I most certainly learned something from listening to the four of them today, and sure appreciate all of your insights. And again, keep up the great work. I'm going to be calling you guys for one of our conferences coming up so you can attend.